everyone. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to Better Together Cross-Functional Alignment 101. We have an amazing team here today. First and foremost, my name is Joni. I am a community events manager here at Modern Sales Pros. My job is very easy. I'm just here to make sure you all have a good time and let these lovely ladies do all of the talking. Like I said, we do have an amazing team here. We have Laura Wheeler from Speckit. She is the VP of RevOps over there. We have Stephanie White. She is the Director of Sales Enablement at Lupio. And our fabulous moderator is Melissa Stewart. She is Senior Change Management Consultant at Mariner Innovations. You may recognize her from a past event, and if not, you are in for a treat. So, lucky for you, these women will be taking the mic for me shortly, right after I go over MVP and how we do things here. So, as I mentioned, and as you're likely picking up on, today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, welcome to the world's largest revenue leadership community with 22,000 members and counting. For those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, development, and all the related supporting disciplines. We've been waiting for you to join us. Thank you for finally being here. Our mission is to create an environment for our exclusive members to answer questions they would struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners they may not even know are there. We do that through great live sessions like what you're about to experience today and through our robust online forum for all the sales nerd Reddits out there. And in the near future, we'll be doing in-person events as well. If you've been with us for a while, you know that was our jam before, so we're super excited to get back to them. For those of you who haven't previously been admitted into the community, you should now have access. And if you don't hesitate to drop our team a note via modernsaleshq.com. And I would also like to give a shout out if you have not attended a summit before. It's events like these, but for 3 days straight. If you like this content, you would love our upcoming Revenue Excellence Summit happening this April from the 12th to the 14th. So stop missing out and get pre-registered to our summit with the link I will be dropping in the chat shortly. And now for the fun stuff. Today's session would not be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Speckit. I'm going to hand it off to Laura, VP of RevOps, to say a few words about her company and the amazing work that they're doing over there. So Laura, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, thanks, Joni. I mean, creating so much FOMO around those MSP events. Love that. So thank you for the opportunity to connect with the community today. So a little bit about Speckit. So really, we're on a mission to tackle the dreaded forgetting curve. And what I mean by that is we know that any new information or that we communicate or that we're training our teams on, about 67% of that is forgotten within 24 hours. So with Speckit, we are a digital enablement platform designed to bring that critical knowledge and information that our employees need to know to be successful right into their natural workflow. So think workflow enablement, and it is true just-in-time enablement that pairs with any program that any of our teams are rolling out. So that's just a little bit about Speckit.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laura. Now I would like to introduce you to our fabulous moderator for the day, Melissa Stewart. Like I said, you might recognize her from past events, and we are so excited to have her here today. So Melissa, go ahead and introduce yourself. You can take it from here. So everyone sit back, relax, and enjoy. I will be back on at the very end for some closing words after we get to the good stuff. Melissa, go ahead.
Thank you, Joni. That was very kind. What a wonderful introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Stewart with Mariner Innovations. I'm a Senior Change Management Specialist, and it's so great to have you all here today. We're really excited to dive in. But first, let's go over some housekeeping notes. First and foremost, this event is being recorded, so you'll be able to access the recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if you do have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to get to them during the event. We'd love to have lots of questions pop in. All right. So, with that, today we are talking about sales enablement with cross functional alignment. And we've got some fantastic experts in the field here to talk us through this content. Laura and Stephanie, before we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you ended up in your enablement roles. And I like to have a little bit of fun. So, I would really enjoy hearing if you had to do karaoke, what song would you pick? Laura, we'll start with you.
Oh, this is awesome. Yes, so I'm Laura. I'm the VP of RevOps here at Speckit. And, my journey up through RevOps, and I do own the enablement function at Speckit too. So that falls under my purview. But I started in inside sales, I don't want to say how many years ago, but I actually grew up through sales, inside sales, leadership, and then really found myself looking under the hood at what was happening in our organization. And so that really led me to sales operations, being a chief of staff to a business unit, and then working my way over to building our America's enablement team at my previous company. And so I've really kind of held a lot of positions within a company, but my general curiosity led me into enablement. And so that's where I've been for the past maybe 6 years or so. And so, and then took the leap over to a startup, and it's been absolutely wonderful. So with that, of course, my karaoke song. If you notice in my LinkedIn profile, it does say karaoke queen. So like, this is my jam sauce. And my go-to is Creep by Radiohead. So yeah, it's not a traditional one, but I can tell you, I'm pretty good at it. So.
I like that. That's a great karaoke song.
Yeah. So
awesome. Well, welcome, Laura. We are very glad to have you on the panel today.
Thank you.
All right, Stephanie, pressure's on. Let's hear from you.
I feel like I need to start this just by saying I have no business doing karaoke. So my song of choice is Complete and Utter Silence, and give the microphone to somebody who needs it. In this case, Laura, amazing. Thank you for joining us today. All joking aside, I would very much abstain from that and instead look to enable those who have a natural skill. See what I did there? Stephanie White here, Director of Revenue Enablement at Loopio. And I have grown up through sales and marketing as well. And so let's just call it 15 to 20 years in different roles, hunting, farming, sales leadership, before moving into sales operations and sales enablement more out of need for the business as a natural progression. And it's been about 3 years, and I love it. I love the ability that we have to help other people hit their numbers, to feel great about what they do. And so I'm in it. I'm excited about it. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephanie. I feel like I need to give you my song.
Yes.
If I picked a karaoke song, it would definitely be Eye of the Tiger. I just feel it in my bones.
Nice.
All right. Well, why don't we dive in? I know we've got a lot to cover and lots of great conversation to be had. So we're covering cross-functional alignment 101 today. And Laura, we're going to kick it off with you. Our first topic is use it, don't lose it. Make your pre-existing systems and data work for you. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on what that means to you.
Yeah. Use it, don't lose it. So the company I was at previously was a data company. So when I think about having the data work for us as enablement or operations professionals, I think over the last 5 to 8 years, we've really started to see silos within organizations break down. And what I mean by that is, generally you would have IT, operations, you'd have HR, which is like talent development, you'd have sales, and then like enablement sometimes went under HR, but like kind of floating in between. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity to understand what data means to each one of these silos as they become broken down. it's currently table stakes for us to be curious about what data lives in our ecosystem, what systems we're using, what we're capturing. And when we're trying to connect and like really think cross-functionally, data means different things to different people. So my advice is really to get curious about what systems we have set up, what we're capturing, and what's that top line, those KPIs of data that we're using in each one of those avenues. And I think we are in a unique place as enablement leaders to have an opportunity to help continue to break down these silos, especially when we have cross-functional projects. I use data as an enablement and operations professional to be proactive, not reactive. Because here's the deal. I don't know any operations team that is probably fully staffed right now. And what I mean by that is we're a very lean team. We're an operational cost to the business. So oftentimes, we get asked to build training programs or really kind of take on some of these cross-functional projects when it's more of a reactionary ask. And I'll give a story. A sales leader might raise their hand and say, we need more competitive training, or we're losing deals to this. But when we go and validate that with data across, it gives us a better understanding to validate if that's an actual concern or not, or if it's a siloed effort. And so I think it can help make our enablement teams a lot more proactive. And, we don't have a lot of time during the day. So if we're going to really focus on those three key things, let it be rooted in the data that's going to be proactive, that's going to put the best output. And then the last thing would be to leverage the data for your benefit as an enablement professional. Having good data is a good way to fund some of your enablement asks. So going to the business and being able to put a number on that or a KPI on what doing X would then output Y and what that benefit is, you can actually use data for headcount justification to bring in external programs or speakers or some of those cross-functional projects that you might not build in-house. And it's a great force multiplier across the business.
I love that. So data, you tell the story, data proves it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a fantastic point. All right, Stephanie, over to you. What do you think?
So I think it's interesting. And I like what you said there, Laura. Sometimes you get a request and it's somebody's perspective, right? Without data, it's an opinion. It's a perspective. And our job, before we do anything else, I love that, by the way, is to figure out, is it valid, right? Yeah. And what is the real why? Yes. I have a little mantra that I like to go through where I like to ask why 3 times. Super annoying to other people, but here's why I do it. Because the first answer you get is going to be an opinion or a perspective. The second answer is often tactical. Your third or fourth layer down, that's where you're going to get the real impact that somebody's looking for. And that's where you have your aha insight moments. We talk about change and data. It's amazing to me. We get these tech stacks going and there can be so many integrations available, and just managing those in and of itself can be completely overwhelming. And a big gap that I see, and that when it comes to data and analyzing the data, is making sure you have clear ownership of who is responsible for each tool. And by that, I mean making sure that any new features that are coming out have been integrated, that we're communicating, that we're training, that we're actually looking at those objectively as part of our process and how we analyze the data that's coming out of it. Otherwise, you create these little faux data gaps, right? Where you think, oh, I got to do a spreadsheet to get this insight out of these 3 things. No, really, there's just an open API that you can use for that. That's such an easy one to help us break down some silos. So often I find, it's not about the systems that you're using, but it's actually how you're framing and telling the story, and really looking to answer that why. Laura, you hit on it, but framing it in terms of insights being forward-looking and impact being backwards looking, right? For how we can leverage data to make good decisions.
I That's amazing. And this is what I do day in and day out. Change management 101, right? When you think about implementing a change, let's say it's a tech change. Let's say it's breaking down these data silos. There are people who are impacted. We need to know why it's happening and communicate that at all different levels of the impacted groups. But when we think about it, technical readiness is one thing, people readiness is another, right? You can install tech, but how much of your success is dependent on the people who are going to use it? We need to make sure that they're ready before we actually do that installation. And then we can say we've implemented and sustained the change. Otherwise, you're doing that rework over and over and over again. I'm on a soapbox now. Let's move on. Okay. So we'll go to our next topic. Communication. It is key. And joining forces to optimize your team's potential is super important. So I'd like to know your thoughts on this. Laura, we're going to throw it to you again.
Oh, communication. I feel like it kind of got harder in this remote world, like I hope I'm saying post-pandemic. But I think communication is absolutely key when you're trying to optimize our team's potential. So when I think about it, common tip is, know your common outputs. So communication and alignment between teams, while those inputs can look different from a product team to, marketing to CS to sales to whoever's involved in a cross-functional project, the inputs at each stakeholder are different. And it's a different what's in it for me. It's a different role and responsibility that they play throughout this project. So when we think about communication, it's not only what we're saying, but trying to understand the common language between each of us. And I'll give an example. So think about, the last time your company rolled out a new product. Now that doesn't just happen overnight. There's some extreme magic that goes in behind that, because from a marketing sense, you're thinking about how are we messaging this to our customers, and what is the messaging internally? And our product and development teams are looking at KPIs and building and giving like the tech specs. Then you've got your operations team who has the KPIs. So like all of these different inputs from all of the different stakeholders that come into this kind of common output of what. So what are we trying to achieve? And like really anchoring in on that communication. I think from an enablement perspective, we do have the unique position to be cross-functional, like the eyes and the ears across the business, providing, maybe marketing with the qualitative and quantitative feedback that we hear as we're working through each of these silos. A lot of the times, what we hear is, do these programs align with each other, or are we at the same place within the project? There could be duplicative efforts going on over here and here that if we have that open communication, then we can kind of nip that and start to move forward, because those are the things that will, as we call it, like pushing the boulder up the hill, will make it more heavy. And so when we think about how that communication is going to help us accelerate through a cross-functional project, that's absolutely key. And I think the alignment too is a huge piece where you can, as an enablement person or cross-functionally, can create these champions for yourself and your team. So you align with different stakeholders within the business to drive actual ownership. So bringing it back to when this project succeeds, what does then that mean for that line of business or that department? And when potentially we all don't have a lot of time during the day to be in every single meeting, what you can do is take those champions to be your champion within that meeting and speak up on your behalf for the inputs that you are putting out. So it just helps force multiply yourself across a project, and then also keeps clarity. So I just think that enablement's in a really unique position to have those eyes and ears across the business.
Yeah, I love that. And the vision is so important, isn't it? That why, and how are you going to measure success in the end and throughout?
Yeah.
All right, Stephanie, let's hear your thoughts.
So the comment of, especially the last couple of years, my biggest annoyance, I'm going to call it, is just this volume of noise that we can sometimes find ourselves in. There's so many systems, you have a joke where suddenly a phone call is old school. Because are you going to Slack me, Zoom me? Are you going to face, like, there's just so many ways to communicate with people. There's so many dings happening everywhere, not least of which you start to consider what's hitting your inbox in terms of reports and things. So I think communication is a fine balance. And we've gone from being so conscious of making sure we over communicate, right? You hear people say, oh, you can't go wrong if you over communicate. No, you really can. Over communicating can be just as problematic as under communicating. And the reason is because the volume all just becomes noise. And so part of being the eyes and ears is also being a bit of a filter or a sieve, thinking critically, like, a great spot to look, go into your CRM, go into your reports section, public reports, pull how many of those reports have not been used in 6 months. And if they have, what is the audience size that they're going to? How duplicative are they? Is that, are they using different definitions? There's just so much noise. So really making sure that we're being concise in how we communicate, I think is so important right now as enablers. You mentioned 67%, I think it was, Laura, right? Of training is gone within 24 hours.
Yeah.
This is always the argument. If you can say it effectively in 50 words, why would you take 100? The mental load for people is so high. And so, when we think about change and alignment, for me, it's really about start with clearing out all the noise and really then be deliberate with your communications. Tier it. What belongs in Slack or another channel? What belongs in email? What should be a video that arrives for just-in-time training? And focus. This is my biggest tip for people. Focus on what you want the audience to understand and take away rather than what you want the speaker to say. It's not about the speaker. It's about the audience and what they walk away with from it.
Amazing. Amazing. The only thing I would add here, Laura and Stephanie, is as part of my work, what I love to do is find the people who are resisting the change.
Oh,
why are they resisting? People generally want to do a good job, right? So there has to be a reason. They're not irrational. There has to be a reason why they're resisting. And if you can turn them around, they'll be your biggest champions.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon.
It's actually very true. I was in a training with maybe a couple of years ago with a bunch of leaders, and it was the topic of why people don't change, or, and it's the first one is I'm scared. Like, I don't know what the other side looks like. So it's like, can I even do it? Like, there's a self-doubt. And then there was one where it's like, I just don't like you. Like, I don't like the person telling me about the change. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. So that's why I do think cross-functional alignment is very key. And the person that's actually delivering the change makes sense. So I think picking the person that is saying that communication is also extremely key.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That communication plan is so very important, especially nowadays. I see the note on the screen, change saturation is real and we are all in it. Think about what's been happening over the past few years outside of our work lives. There's a lot of change around us and people are torn in a lot of directions. So if we can make our planning and our communication as clear and concise as possible, and also take any feedback and thoughtfully consider it and maybe incorporate it, who knows? People will feel a part of the change and they'll feel like you're supporting them through it.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And it's interesting when you said resistors, I pictured that scene from the movie. I won't reference which one, but where she's like, I will find you. I think you do need to actively seek out. You're going to have resistors, and some of them hide, right? Because they want to live in the shadows. They don't want to get called out for not following process or new policy. But that's where you find your nuggets of where you can improve.
Yes.
Because if you can get those resistors to be candid in their feedback, well, tell me what didn't land. Was it the wrong speaker? Did I not communicate it effectively? Did we not provide context for why the what's in it for you, right? Tell me the miss. So I always kind of jokingly like to find those gifts and drop them into people and just be, I realize you haven't adopted and I'm coming for you, but in a very positive way because I value your feedback.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm going to be thinking about that now. Every time I'm trying to find my resistors, I will find you. Okay. Let's move on to our third topic here. So Laura, we're going to kick it off with you again. This one is all around productivity and revenue goals and how we can look at each team's goals to build better client relationships. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think when we look at each team's productivity goals or revenue goals, well, really, I think everyone in a company should have a little stake in the game for a revenue goal. So that's just my plug as a RevOps leader. But I do think that building better client relationships really does help with that understanding. So like I was talking about the common outputs, just understanding what KPIs are actually driving the business. We probably have a myriad of different people on the line at different sizes of companies or different industries and different teams and structures. And so maybe if you've jumped from one company to the other, just taking a step back and understanding what the KPIs that are driving the business actually mean to them. When you roll out a program or maybe it's a new tool or process, there's a reason behind it. So it didn't come out of thin air. And so what does that KPI look like that's going to drive the improvement in the business so that we can kind of speak each other's language? I think celebrating each team's productivity at different milestones and the successes that we're seeing across the business and that kind of ripple effect impact will really help better build those client relationships. We have a Slack channel internally that's called wins. And when, someone has a win, whether it's a closed won deal or I, overcame this, like the entire company comes together to celebrate that. And so I think when you are give that transparency across, that just creates an atmosphere that we are going to be better clients and partners together. So my big thing would just say, the more transparency, the better. And the more that we can build those relationships and stay invested in each other's success is very key across cross collaboration. So
yeah, I think that's something that we forget to do sometimes is celebrate those wins.
Yeah.
And
even
it's so
small
important.
ones.
Yeah. There's momentum that happens when you do that, right?
Yeah.
It's motivating.
Totally.
Excellent. Okay.
Well, and it's interesting to plug on, like, everybody should have some component of revenue as a motivator, right? Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more.
Okay, good. I was like, oh man, did I misspeak?
No. I love it. And for me, it's because, two things. When you're thinking about how you can measure employees and really focus on driving customer experience, it's really start with the basics, right? So at the end of the day, any of us who are in B2B companies, we're people supporting people supporting people.
Yeah.
And if you're in enablement, you're one people level up on that tree. So, laughing aside, the focus of that is it's about what your end users are going to experience.
Yeah.
Right. And so focusing on what the value and the customer experience is, and then working backwards to make sure, okay, well, what are the behaviors that we need to see on our team to support that value and customer experience? Cool. How are we going to motivate them? How do we align cross-functionally? You can talk about company-wide KPIs. Well, customer satisfaction or NPS are common ones. When's the last time you took a step back and you looked at everybody's comp plans and actually critically thought, are we motivating financially the right behaviors to support these KPIs? Revenue is a big part of that. but there are so many facets of how we can start to look for opportunities to make sure that we're all going in the same direction.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And sometimes, the measures we have in place could go against what we're trying to achieve. And we need to go back and review it. That's a fantastic point. The only thing I would add here from a change management perspective is I always say that we should involve people early and often, right? If we're implementing a change that's depending on people for the success, we need to get their feedback and their thoughts on how this change is going to roll out. Are there things that we need to tweak along the way, right? So they feel a part of the process because they are a part of the process.
And Melissa, interesting statement. As that relates to client relationships, a lot of the cross-functional projects we might be working on are, customer facing. And so do you involve a specific set of customers to be a part of that change? Case in point, the story earlier about like a product release. It's very common practice to have a couple customers be early adopters and like give feedback. So I think it does go kind of full circle with client relationships too in that aspect.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. External people, if they're involved, should definitely be a part of that process. Yeah. Okay, well, we've got through all of our topics, Laura and Stephanie. So I'm going to take a look at the chat and see if we've got any questions in here that we can tackle. If you do have a question, throw it in the chat and we will get to it. Okay.
And perhaps in the interim, I will lob a ball, Laura, to you and Melissa. So Melissa, being a change management expert, what is the number one gotcha that you look out for when you are implementing a systems or process change? I'm going to be the moderator for a minute.
Wait a minute, that's my job.
This is real time, everybody.
I would say something that is very, very important and is the beginning of every change is that vision. What are we trying to achieve? What is the goal, the business outcome, and how are we going to measure it? Because that information, it's so critical. It feeds into every communication that you send out. It feeds into how you're tailoring your training. It feeds into that success measurement after the fact, after you're done. And the people who are coming up with that vision statement have to be visible. So your executive sponsor, the leader of the change, they have to be involved throughout the process because it shows how important it is to the organization. That would be my number one response to that question. Moderator Stephanie.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Watch how fast I get fired from this job. Laura, I'd love to hear your perspective.
I would absolutely agree with Melissa. I think something that's lost that I've seen done actually really well is giving those that are going to be affected by the change space to process. So I think someone said it earlier about people readiness. And I think now, and this is depending on impact, but it goes back to that humans are naturally resistant to change. And so when you just kind of trudge forward, like, here's the vision, here's what we're going to do. And then that's what we want to do. That's who we are. But if we slow down and we give people the why, but also the space to like go through that change curve. Like, I hate it. I love it. Okay, I'm in. All right. Because everyone's processing it at a different motion. And so you're going to have similar to sales, you're going to have your early adopters, you're going to have your naysayers. And then so I think maybe giving people a space to feel their feels about the change is something that is quite often forgotten, but does have a huge impact. So not always the right thing, timing wise, but if you can do that, that will definitely help.
Absolutely. Because if you don't do it before it's implemented, you'll have to do it after.
Right?
So
Yeah.
where do you want to feel that pain in the process?
Exactly.
So I've got this line I like to use when I'm doing check-ins with people who have been onboarding. And we do it one-to-one without their manager by design so that they can tell me their feels, right? And it's this kick back, relax, put your feet up, tell me how you're feeling. That's always like the opener of my check-in point. For exactly the reason you just talked about, Laura.
Yeah.
Like you're going to feel the change, right? This is people over process. With everything we're talking about with change management, it's people over process as our focus for enablement. So getting ahead of that, I'm curious, how have you found success in quantifying it, reporting on it, sharing that feedback so that it's not as qualitative when you get it?
Great question. I don't know if you tackled that yet. That's a great question. Because qualitative is what you would default to. Like, how do you feel before? How do you feel afterwards? Maybe there's a benchmark of change from like old KPI to new KPI. That maybe there's like you can shorten the time span if you get people on board quicker. But I don't know, Melissa, if you've had any, successful KPIs in change management. It is pretty fluffy, but maybe it is that shortening of, the success that you're trying to see, and benchmarking that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another tool that I like to use at different points in the process, so it could be at the very beginning, before training, after training, would be measuring their readiness. So how aware are they? Do they feel like they have the knowledge to push the change through? Do they have the ability to push it through? Do they understand the change? Could they explain it to a colleague? Right? All of these things that we need to get down into. And sometimes it's a big group of people that you're surveying, but that information is so very important because it helps you pinpoint areas that you may need to circle back on and troubleshoot a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, we have a question. Look how excited I got there. Okay. What is a moment in your career that you had to shift your process to cater more towards developing people readiness or common language? Stephanie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So I read this question as it popped up, and I had one of those really self-aware moments. So I think coming from sales and having some strong success as an individual salesperson, I thought that much like being a BDR, you can kind of muscle your way through stuff, right? Like it's I'm just going to keep driving through this wall. And if I hit an obstacle, I'm going to go. I got to do 25 calls today. I'm going to go. And so I would say for me, a big shift was when I transitioned from a higher volume sales environment to a much longer sales cycle. As an individual seller, that was a consultative environment where I really had to shift even how I was communicating to my prospects and my existing accounts about their own readiness to adopt our product, about their own readiness to understand the pain that they actually had in their organization, whether they realized it or not. And that was definitely a pivotal point for me in terms of approaching problems more thoughtfully rather than with muscle, energy, and grit alone. I'm thankful that happened pretty early on because I certainly would not have been able to be successful in enablement without that light bulb moment a long time ago. But that was definitely, those IC sales roles that are high volume, transitioning to the bigger picture thinking, that was a real moment for me. And it happened in about the span of 3 or 4 days where it was super clear that what got me there was not going to get me further ahead. So that was mine. How about the two of you?
Laura, over to you.
Yeah, I think two kind of pop up in mind. So one is we had identified this category of like emerging leaders within our organization. So ICs that were interested in like management. And I don't know, building a program to that is one thing we could probably talk ad nauseum about, but there's this stigma that if I'm a good IC, I'm going to be a great manager. Like, I know all the things, like I know how to sell, I'm just going to tell people what to do. And then like, we're going to make a lot of money. Not the case. So what we were seeing is this kind of natural progression of people wanting to raise their hand, thinking that it's the next thing in their career path. And then current leaders saying, oh, well, they were good at their job, so let's just put them in a management role. And we had to take the step back and really, we developed a program called Emerging Leaders, and we had stakeholders with sales teams and leaders and enablement to get them people ready. And it's the things that you just don't see from the outside looking in, like getting people ready to interview. Like a lot of maybe ICs aren't on interviews, getting them in the headspace to create a vision for their team or how to run an effective one-on-one that they might not get exposure to. So it was more of a, let's give you a safe space to practice some of these like people-oriented things that you might not get in your normal day-to-day. And a couple people that went through this, first or second iteration, they're like, you know what, I'm okay. I think I'm just going to stay as an IC. They were very comfortable with doing that. And I would call that success, in my book, but it's something where you do need to have some people readiness there to get themselves in the right frame of mind of, is this really what I want? And what I need to do and practice in a safe space. And then the second one is anybody that's ever been through a merger or acquisition on either side. If you're in enablement or sale, like that's a big emotional impact on people. And that's when we ran our entire leadership when we were acquired by a company through change management training. And it was essentially guiding our leaders on how to guide their employees through that change curve and preparing people to receive this inevitable change and how to mitigate and give them the space to do that. And I think laying that groundwork helped immensely. So for anybody on here that's been in a merger acquisition or does M&A enablement, like that's a big one. So
it's funny. We joke around at Mariner because we build capabilities in change management for our clients. And we say, maybe we're working ourselves out of a job. Who knows?
Oh, man.
But we love it. I'd say if I was to give an example, in a previous life, I was in enablement and created an onboarding program. It was a great onboarding program, and it was something that was delivered in person. And then the pandemic hit. So we really had to quickly pivot and provide something that was going to give a similar experience, help them see what our kind of raison d'etre was, right? What made us tick. And it was tough, but you really had to take a step back and think about, what do these new people who are joining us, what do they need? They need time to connect with other people. They need to learn about the organization. There's so many different pieces that we had to add to our onboarding program, but in the end, it was, I think, relatively successful considering how quickly we had to change.
Yeah.
Great question. Okay. Well, folks, I think that's the end of our questions. So
we have one more, Melissa.
We do?
I think there's two.
Where is it? Okay, can you read it? I don't see it.
Yeah. How do you leverage diverse skills and experience in terms of cross-functional alignment and roles? Melissa, I will put it to you first.
I can't even see the question. What was the question again?
Leveraging diversity in terms of skills and experience cross-functionally. So in terms of teams and roles, how do you leverage that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can speak to this in a project I'm working on right now. We have, I'm working with a client. We're doing a big tech overhaul. We're switching their front end tech that they use on a day-to-day basis. And I've noticed that there are some people included in some of these meetings that I've been in who I think would be fantastic change champions. They're not afraid to have difficult conversations. They're confident people. They're subject matter experts. So I've been trying to leverage them as much as I can throughout my planning process. Also, I'd like to leverage them as internal influencers. A lot of my communication planning usually is tiered, right? It'll go from executive to leader to team lead to frontline staff member. But sometimes there are internal influencers that people will actually really grasp onto what they're saying. So I've noticed a few of those people in this project that I'm trying to incorporate into my planning as well.
I love that. Yeah. And I can speak to this a little bit. I think if you're a driver of a cross-functional project that's happening, it might behoove us to take each role that has a part in this and writing out the competencies of what is like would be a strength for that role. So case in point, if you need someone to help with data and analytics, probably not going to be me. But if you need someone that's super organized, like detail oriented, or has a knack for XYZ, so maybe it's thinking about the skills and the competencies that are needed throughout like a cross-functional project and kind of mapping those out. And maybe a typical role that like someone might play within, this program rollout or change management, maybe they play a different role because that plays to their strengths. And so I think you can uncover those diverse skills and experiences and match them up to where you're going to maximize the potential in that project.
Very cool. I also like to look at, part of our job is to have very close relationships with leaders, right? Across teams. And I like to have the conversations, particularly around, so at Lupia, we do growth plans, we do reviews twice a year, and it's really focused on conversations surrounding growth and development. So what better time as an enabler who perhaps doesn't have the headcount that you would like to have in a dream world to start looking at available options? Hey, talk to me about some of the trends you're seeing for growth plans. Who do you have that you're looking for a growth opportunity for? Who's got something bright and shiny about who they are, where perhaps they may be from a different team, but maybe they would love to participate in creating training videos, or they would write great content for outreach or what have you. And actually being able to leverage your own project opportunities to supplement somebody's development plan. Like,
yes. That'll go a long way for retention. Yes. Yes.
I got 2 of those so far. The goal is 3. We'll see what happens.
I love that. That actually helps me build the bench for my team. It uncovers like, oh man. And if someone's really interested in that, like pay attention, like have them pay attention to like what they're drawn to, like those strengths, and then just, give them the baton and pass it off. I love that. Yeah. Definitely should utilize that more.
And
I think there's this whole behind the curtain magic about enablement, right? And sometimes RevOps too, right? Let's be honest, Laura. Where it's like, I often have people say to me, hey, we've worked together a little while. What do you do? Right? Other than training, what do you do? Because I see you're involved in all kinds of things. What do you actually do? Because I think there can be so much that is project oriented that the larger company can see. And, Melissa, this goes back to your comment about sharing the vision, having your roadmap of what you want to accomplish cross-functionally and sharing that well in advance helps to shift so that when the tactical projects come up and they see your name tagged to it, they can link it to the larger vision, right? So it's like, aha, this isn't about changing a sales process. This is about going up market. This isn't about, tweaking copy on something. This is actually about reframing product usage. So that can have a huge value as well.
Absolutely. Moving towards that shared goal in the end, right? Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny, Stephanie. And Melissa, I would love to know, have you ever enabled your stakeholders on enablement? like to the comment of well, tell me what you do, because there is a lot of stuff that goes back, behind the scenes. And so when we're asked to deliver a program within 2 weeks, I have to go back to my stakeholder and say, let me tell you what all goes into this. I'm going to need at least 6 to 8 weeks to, like build this. But it is true. Like I've actually had to reverse enable my stakeholders on enablement. And it actually then frames it up to where that becomes a really great partnership, and sets the stage for then my success. And then they can help, be a part of that. So enablement on it.
The best analogy is, and I've busted out a couple of times in the last few months, I'm not going to lie, it's an iceberg. Okay. So enablement is an iceberg. You see the tip of it. You have no idea how much work, like the mass that can be under the waterline, but the power is below the waterline, right? And it is all the, to your earlier comments, like Melissa, the planning and the sharing of the vision, and Laura, like developing out your bench and getting those alliances, all that work that comes to like a little thing, a seemingly little thing that delivers at the end. But well, that little thing can have such a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think, do you have to enable, people on enablement? Yes. Because I do also think, there's this perception of if somebody hasn't lived through it themselves, they don't necessarily understand the hours it can take to build a piece of training collateral. The flip side of that is, maybe they've lived in it so in depth that they can become one of your advocates. Maybe they're in a different now, but you find out that they've been enablement in the past. Amazing. I would love to roll this out to your team. Can you help support this in terms of, helping to get insights and feedback and have that person be a voice for enablement also?
Yeah, absolutely. My friends, I've tried to explain to them a few times what I do, and I've been nicknamed Chandler.
I love you hard at that.
Yeah, there's a lot of enablement on change management as well, and a lot of coaching of people who are involved in leading the change. Completely feel where you're coming from. Yeah,
that's awesome.
All right. Well, Chandler is going to move us ahead here. So I'd love to hear your key takeaways. If you were to give me a tweet length takeaway of what you want people to retain from our session today, what would it be?
Popcorn, Stephanie. First of all, how long is a tweet? I'm not on Twitter.
I was just thinking, I'm not on Twitter.
I think it's 125 characters, maybe.
Yeah.
I think I would probably summarize it. I'll take a stab at this first. I think for me, I would summarize it as, enablement is a team sport. You will accomplish nothing successfully by yourself at your own desk, in your own head. The best programs, though some conversations may happen in your head, the best programs really look to validate opinions with data, to drive insights, come up with solutions that matter to people, not just processes and systems, and make them better at what they do. And what they do might be customer success. It might be outbound sales. It might be any number of functions. But, really making sure that though it feels sometimes like you're pushing that big old rock up the hill by yourself or with your two other people supporting a team of 100, our success is so dependent on really being the eyes and ears for the rest of the organization to tell them what they need to hear and to see their blind spots for them to really help facilitate everyone being stronger. That's my ad hoc takeaway. There you go.
That was great, Stephanie. That was great.
Improv here. That's what we do.
Oh, it's amazing.
Laura, let's hear yours.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is the best programs and the best cross-functional alignment are built on a solid foundation. And so to do that, maybe I didn't say this earlier, but it's better to, well, as my husband says, slow is fast. So making sure that you have those foundational elements in place, and that is people readiness, it is the vision, it is data, and it all comes together with a common objective across teams. And when you have that, then you can move quicker and you are more aligned. So yeah, that's my tweet. And I think that would be my main takeaway as today.
That was great. I'm going to give you
Pretty sure we
mine.
both went over the limit.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep mine within the 125 characters here.
Yeah.
My go-to motto is perfection is the barrier to progress.
Mm-hmm.
If we think we're perfect and we don't think we can improve, we're not going to go any better. We're not going to change, right?
Yeah.
So that's my leave behind, everybody. Mic drop.
Nice.
All right. So this has been a fantastic discussion. I've actually thoroughly enjoyed this. And
you seem surprised.
It's been great. I've got some amazing tips and insights, and I really want to thank you both for your time and sharing your knowledge and your experiences today. And one last thing I'd like to say is Happy International Women's Day. It's great to share this with you. All right, Joni, back to you.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing. Okay, we should be good now. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been an amazing conversation, a lot of good insights, and a nicely personalized take, I will say. I think the karaoke is what kicked us off on a good start. So we're going to wrap things up. Of course, thank you to all of you for attending. We've loved having you here. It's really exciting getting to put out enablement content and having such well-seasoned professionals on this topic. Thank you to Speckit. They're doing great things, so be sure to check them out. Thank you to Melissa, Stephanie, and Laura, of course, for providing such great content. The recordings and takeaways will be available on our site shortly, as always, and don't forget to check out our upcoming events. So stay safe, and we will see you all next time. Thank you again to our speakers and moderator, and we'll go from there. Have a good one, everyone.